Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is August 23rd. On this day in 1973, Stockholm, Sweden, a quiet Scandinavian capital known for order and calm, suddenly found itself at the center of a crime that the whole world would watch unfold. On August 23rd, an escaped convict stormed a downtown bank, took 4 people hostage, and set off 6 days of tense negotiations, fear, and an outcome that nobody could have expected. Today, we're talking not only about the Norrmalmstorg bank robbery, but a phrase that we still use today, Stockholm Syndrome. Let's get started. It was a Thursday morning just before 10 a.m. in the heart of Stockholm. Workers hurried into offices, children chased the late summer sun, and in Norrmalmstorg Square, Sveriges Kreditbank was already busy with customers and clerks. Then, the calm broke. A man stepped through the glass doors, Jan Erik Olsen. He was 32 years old and was serving a prison sentence for grand larceny, but had been on temporary furlough, from which he escaped. He wore a brown wig, fake glasses, rouged cheeks, and had dyed his eyebrows and mustache. Tucked under his jacket was a loaded submachine gun, and in a suitcase he carried ammunition, explosives, rope, walkie-talkies, and a spare pair of gloves. Without hesitation, Olsen fired 3 shots into the ceiling. The building froze. In a theatrical, fake American accent, he shouted, "The party has just begun." He quickly rounded up employees, forcing 4 bank workers into the vault. Brigitta Lundblad, a teller, Elizabeth Oldgren, a stenographer, Kristen Enmark, just 23 years old, and Sven Sofstrom, the only man among the hostages. From inside the vault, he made his demands. He wanted his old cellmate, Clark Olofsson, brought to the bank, 3 million kroner in cash, bulletproof vests, helmets, submachine guns, and a fast car parked outside. By midday, police had surrounded the bank. Snipers lined to the rooftops, and hundreds of people gathered in the square, waiting for updates. Reporters set up cameras, and for the first time in Swedish history, a hostage crisis unfolded live on television. Even Prime Minister Olof Palme became directly involved in the negotiations, and Clark Olofsson was brought to the bank just as Olsen had asked. Stockholm had never seen anything like it. As hours turned into days, something strange began happening inside that vault. The hostages were terrified, but their fear didn't always point toward the gunmen. Instead, it began shifting toward the police outside. When Prime Minister Palme spoke by phone with hostage Kristen Enmark, he expected desperate pleas for rescue. Instead, she told him calmly, quote, "I fully trust Clark and the robber. They haven't done a thing to us. On the contrary, they've been very nice," end quote. Inside the vault, Olsen alternated between intimidation and caretaking. When Kristen shivered in the cold, he draped his wool jacket over her shoulders. He reassured them that he wouldn't hurt them, as long as the police didn't storm the bank. At one point, he even handed her a bullet as a keepsake. The hostages began to feel caught between 2 dangers: the police, who might storm the bank with guns and tear gas, and the robbers, who at least were showing them small kindnesses. Meanwhile, the public could not look away. By the second day, the standoff dominated national television. Families sat glued to their sets watching live updates. Newspapers ran dramatic headlines. Crowds filled the square outside of the bank, some even cheering on Olsen and Olofsson. The vault had become not just a prison, but a stage, and Sweden was the audience. By day 3, August 25th, the dynamic inside the vault had fully shifted. The hostages worried more about police tactics than about the men who were holding the guns. When officers suggested an evacuation, asking them to walk out first, they refused. They were convinced that it would put their lives in greater danger. Their loyalty ran deep enough that when negotiations turned tense, they pleaded for the robbers' safety. One even suggested fundraising to pay for the men's defense. Psychiatrist Niels Bejerot, brought in as a consultant, studied the situation and coined the term Norrmalmstorg Syndrome. International media quickly picked it up under another name, Stockholm Syndrome. The term later applied to cases like Patty Hearst in the U.S. and countless fictional characters in movies and TV. But here, in 1973, it was playing out in real time. By August 28th, the stalemate had stretched into its sixth exhausting day. Negotiations had gone nowhere, food was running low, and tempers had frayed. That morning, police made their move. Engineers drilled through the bank ceiling and released tear gas into the vault. The hostages coughed and cried. Olsen and Olofsson stumbled out, eyes burning, hands raised in surrender. On live television, the world saw the moment it ended. Miraculously, all 4 hostages survived without physical harm. In the months that followed, the trials became another spectacle. Olsen was sentenced to 10 years for robbery and hostage-taking. Olofsson, though initially convicted, won on appeal, arguing that he had simply been drawn in by circumstance and had done his best to keep the hostages safe. And the strangest part was that the hostages seemed to agree. Kristen Enmark later described feeling safer with the gunmen than with the police, whom she believed had endangered their lives. Olsen, after serving his sentence, eventually moved on. In prison, he became engaged to a woman who had written him fan letters. Olofsson drifted in and out of crime and prison in later years, but his connection to Norrmalmstorg remained his most infamous legacy. The robbery's most enduring impact was not legal, it was psychological and cultural. The phrase Stockholm Syndrome entered global vocabulary. It came to describe not just hostages, but any situation in which someone under pressure identified with or defended the very person harming them. It was debated, dramatized, and sometimes overused, but it remained one of the most famous psychological terms to emerge from a single crime. Police around the world changed their tactics after Norrmalmstorg. Instead of immediate force, negotiators learned to buy time, use psychology, and recognize that emotions inside of a siege may not be what you expect. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found today's episode compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day, True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!